drag pianos into the street. Let drums rend the air asunder. Whether drums or pianos beat, let tumult be, let thunder. Enough of penny-wise talk. Wipe the old from the heart who dares. The streets shall be our brushes. Our palettes shall be the squares. The 1,000-paged book of time, revolution's song shall know. Into the streets, futurists, drummers, and poets, go. Vladimir Mayakovsky, Decree to the Army of Art, 1918. The Russia in which Dmitri Shostakovich came of age was dominated by the fervent idealism and nihilistic intolerance that are such common features of the revolutionary spirit. The abdication of the Tsar in March of 1917 and the overthrow of the succeeding provisional parliamentary government by the Bolsheviks 6 months later led to a bloody civil war between communist and anti-communist forces that would last until the fall of 1922, when the Red Army achieved effective control of the entire country. The optimism that accompanied the revolution was largely sustained until Stalin fully consolidated his power in the late 1930s. In spite of body counts that rose alarmingly from year to year, generations of brutal Tsarist oppression had engendered a belief within the general public that official violence was a fact of life, and thus the new government's framing of its victims as enemies of a revolution that had brought freedom to that amorphous mass they called the people was widely accepted. It seemed inevitable that the construction of a brave new world would have its costs. In the minds of the most fervent Soviet communists, their vision wasn't utopian, since it was based on rigorous, albeit largely untested, Marxist social science. In her definitive account of the Russian Revolution, Sheila Fitzpatrick noted that this bold revolutionary thinking was as excitingly modern and remote from mundane reality as futurist art. The 1920s were a time when intellectual and cultural experimentation flourished, and an iconoclastic attitude to the past was required among young radical intellectuals. Machines, including the well-ordered machine of future society, fascinated them. They denounced sentiment, spirituality, human drama, and individual psychology. Avant-garde artists saw revolutionary art and politics as part of the same protest against the old bourgeois world. They were among the first members of the intelligentsia to accept the October Revolution and offer their services to the new Soviet government, producing propaganda posters in Cubist and Futurist style, painting revolutionary slogans on the walls of former palaces, and bringing politically relevant messages into the conventional theater. If the avant-garde artists had had their way, traditional art would have been liquidated even more quickly than the bourgeois political parties. The content of Shostakovich's early symphonies is deeply informed by the cultural and political environment in which he grew up and essential aspects of a personality that was at once lively and introverted. He was born in St. Petersburg in 1906 to parents with strong revolutionary sympathies, and his paternal grandfather had spent years in Siberian exile for his supposed involvement in a plot to assassinate Tsar Alexander II. Shostakovich began his musical studies at the age of 9 with piano lessons from his mother, and shortly thereafter he made his first attempts at composition. His astonishing abilities soon became apparent, and in 1919 the 13-year-old was accepted for study at the St. Petersburg Conservatory, where he quickly surpassed his much older peers. The St. Petersburg of Shostakovich's youth, it was renamed Petrograd during World War I and then Leningrad after Lenin's death in 1924, was characterized by an odd mixture of revolutionary strife and cultural traditionalism. His composition teacher, Maximilian Steinberg, was a disciple of Rimsky-Korsakov, who rejected the work of Russian modernists like Stravinsky and Prokofiev and subjected his students to a didactically led, tradition-bound curriculum that Shostakovich found stifling. And yet his rebelliousness was tempered by an essential unwillingness to embrace any particular artistic ideology, and thus he responded to the radical developments in syntax that roiled early 20th century music with a characteristic diffidence. In the words of a conservatory colleague, he absorbed only what was useful to him, both within his study course and outside it. By following his own path, he achieved artistic freedom. Shostakovich's first symphony, which was written when he was 18 as a requirement for his graduation from the Leningrad Conservatory in the spring of 1925, is a reflection of this sorting process. While the influence of composers such as Stravinsky, Prokofiev, Schoenberg, and Rachmaninoff is readily apparent, the whole is dominated by the finely etched orchestration, biting sarcasm, and tragic lyricism that would remain such defining features of his symphonic music. For a composer in the modern era to achieve such an authentic realization of his musical style while still in his teens was remarkable, and the first symphony was received with widespread acclaim. Cultural commissars touted the work as a triumph of socialist art written by a homegrown Soviet composer with an impeccable revolutionary lineage, an exemplification of the ideological invigoration of the new Russian state. In fact, the symphony was just the first of many Shostakovich works that would be subjected to torrents of speculation and projection. In the years to come, his elusive, enigmatic personality would only fuel this effort to define his creative motivations. But as memories of the Cold War fade, the reflexive tendency to view all of Shostakovich's work through an ideological lens becomes less prevalent, yielding to a sensibility that allows us to hear his extraordinary music simply as an expression of his unique artistic voice.